He lifted the sanctions as quickly as he could. George Bush, however, came to office with a commitment to India. And the way I characterize it, the Bush administration approached India strategically through China. When the Bush people came in, they immediately defined China as the major strategic rival to the United States. This was before 9/11. So if you're going to balance the Chinese, where do you look around for friends? To the Japanese, certainly, even to the Vietnamese, but particularly to India. So I think one of the motives of the Bush crew was to approach India and try and build India up as a major balancer of China. They never said this publicly, but privately this was their view, and there was one point which they said the American goal was to build India into one of the major Asian strategic powers, military and strategic powers. And from this flowed the nuclear deal and a lot of military-to-military relations. I have reservations about the wisdom of these kinds of statements. I think that our expectation of Indian military power was exaggerated. I'm writing a book about this now, but clearly Bush was serious about this, and when the negotiations threatened to break down, he intervened and told the American delegation simply to accept the Indian view. So in a sense, he forced this through on the American side, and of course Manmohan Singh pushed it through on the Indian side. This brings us to the Obama people. Obama has regarded and has said publicly, frequently, the major strategic problem of the United States located in Afghanistan. Not Iraq, but Afghanistan. And in terms, he barely ever mentions China. So I think that the Obama people strategically approach India from the other direction. If Afghanistan is where the terrorists are, if Afghanistan is where Al-Qaeda might again make a home, then you have to deal with it one way or the other militarily. And because Afghanistan and Pakistan are a single strategic entity, you have to deal with Pakistan. And because Pakistan's major strategic concern is India, therefore you deal with India. So while the Bush people came to India through China, the Obama people tend to come to India through Afghanistan and Pakistan. I think both approaches are I won't say wrong, but incomplete. And I think we'll discover, as the next months go through, we'll see exactly how they're going to implement this new strategy of approaching India through, in a sense, from the west, not from the east. I would observe, however, that even in the Obama group, while there were some critics of the U.S.-India nuclear deal, in fact, a lot of critics of the U.S.-India nuclear deal, there's nobody in that group, the senior foreign policy advisors to Obama, including the Secretary of State. His Secretary of State will be Hillary Clinton. Everybody likes India. There's no element, there's no trace now in Washington of the old Bash India group. They were originally predominant on the Republican side. There are some Democrats who didn't like India for various reasons, but I think that's just about evaporated. And India is seen more realistically now, more nuanced now, I think by all elements of the American political spectrum. So I think all of the Obama people that I know, regardless of the criticism or doubts about the U.S.-India nuclear deal, think that a strong relationship with India is worthwhile. The critical decision that the Obama administration will have to make is how they will treat the India-Pakistan relationship. And I won't go into detail here. There's a bunch of my things on the Brookings website. But clearly, they've talked about publicly about an intervention in Kashmir. They recognize that Pakistan itself is a problem. And that the coherence of Pakistan as a state is questionable. Even the Bush administration now has begun to understand that Pakistan, the structure of Pakistan and the coherence of Pakistan as a state is an important issue. But the Obama administration has or Barack Obama himself has let out hints that there will be a new American initiative on Kashmir. I don't want to go into detail in this, but my view is that if Kashmir becomes a focal point of American policy in South Asia, probably be a serious mistake. They've talked about Richard Holbrooke or Bill Clinton himself being special emissaries for Kashmir to India and Pakistan. I think we need to take a regional approach, look at South Asia as a strategic whole, even including China, and not try to again deal with the Kashmir issue. Brookings is publishing a book by Ambassador Howard Schaefer, which is a brilliant history of American efforts to deal with Kashmir from 1947 onward. I think if Holbrooke or Clinton were to read the book, they would turn down the offer of the job. It was a record of unmitigated failure. We tried hard. We never understood the local realities in South Asia. And I think the Kashmiris themselves represent a new element. So I think that I would be skeptical of any large-scale American initiative on Kashmir. Having said that, I think that many thoughtful Indians understand that Kashmir is still a problem. It's still inscribed in the United Nations as the very first peacekeeping problem. And in some ways, I'll argue this tomorrow perhaps, India needs to liberate itself both from Kashmir and from Pakistan to take its place in Asia as a major state. It's hard for it to rise as a country dragging these issues behind it. But we can talk about that in the Q&A and perhaps tomorrow. Let me talk briefly about Mumbai and how we saw it in the United States. The Lashkar-e-Taiba, through what I call brilliant stupidity, has managed to do what the Indian government has been unable to do to internationalize Pakistan's tacit or explicit support for terrorists. For years, the Indian government has been unable to persuade the United States, or any other country for that matter, to crack down on Pakistan and force the Pakistani government to crack down on its on terrorists operating from its own soil. The evidence was always ambiguous, or the Indians weren't persuasive enough, or India was partly to blame, or there was a fear that if Pakistan was declared a terrorist-supporting state, that a moderate government might fall in Pakistan, and this would open the road to power for Islamic radicals. I testified before Congress once during the Musharraf years, and I said the Pakistani position was this: help me or else. That is, if they didn't help Pakistan, Musharraf would go. And if Musharraf went, the argument was, after Musharraf, the deluge, wall-to-wall radical Islamist. That was always a myth. Pakistanis have never voted in large numbers for radical Muslim parties. Even in this last election, which is unusually a free election for Pakistan, I think they got 6 or 8% of the total vote. They're not a significant political force in the ballot box. And my argument during most of the Bush administration was, give democracy a chance in Pakistan. Don't go with the dictator. And I think that turned out to be closer to reality. More to the point, and really a difficult issue, is that American officials, British officials, Europeans believe that they need Pakistani cooperation to operate in Afghanistan. And if you think about it, 80% of NATO's supplies in Afghanistan come through Pakistan. 50 or 60% of American supplies in Afghanistan, fight the war there, come through Pakistan. So any time we threaten to cut off or to sanction Pakistan, the Pakistanis can turn the screws. That is, stop supplies flowing from Karachi up through the Khyber Pass and other passes into Afghanistan. And that is an important lever that they have over the relationship. Therefore, sanctioning Pakistan, isolating Pakistan, Pakistanis can respond in their own fashion, in their own way. So it's not an easy option for the Americans to contemplate. But what has happened is that the United States, because of Mumbai, I think has begun to understand and sympathize the Indian position. For a couple of years now, we have been actually bombing and attacking parts of Pakistan openly, openly and freely. Although we don't admit it, but it has gone on. And I think that there's a realization that if a state cannot control its own territory, outsiders have the right to intervene in that state. Of course, the citizens of that state may object, but that's what we've been doing in Pakistan. And the question is, does India have that right? Can India intervene in Pakistan, respond in kind to support for Lashkar?